Adam, thank you for taking the time just to take this opportunity to really share a little bit more about what's going on with you in your life and in your sphere of influence. So a little bit of background info. Adam's a GP in Stockport, an educator. I can't pretend to know exactly what that means. And an elder. And I do want to know what that means because I'm one myself. Adam, if you wouldn't mind just giving like a little brief testimony, of your background and how you came to be where you are.
Cool. Yeah, so good to catch up, Andy. And I guess in terms of my testimony, some people will know, some people won't. I've been at Ivy for 20 years now, and came to faith at Ivy Cottage, as it was back then. And I guess as a potted history, as a kid, I went to a C of E school. I knew Bible stories. I would occasionally go to church when it came to things like scouting, like scout parades and Easter. But it was always a bit alien to me in some ways. Like my perceptions of church back then and faith back then were cold. Like it was the church building that we went to, I always remember it being cold. Like there were stone floors and wooden pews, and there were grannies with like a little bit of stubble. And there's this weird thing of like the juice that was always something to look forward to when the service finished was either always too weak or always way too strong. Like it was never just quite right, is my memory of it. They were like pink wafer biscuits, but they were sometimes a bit soft, and you're only allowed one and you wanted more. Anyway, that was kind of church as a kid. And when I came to university in Manchester, I found myself being friends with loads of Christians who I thought were a bit odd. And I used to love arguing with them. I kind of described myself back then as an agnostic atheist. There's a little chink of something, but ultimately I used to love spending plenty of time having a couple of drinks maybe and pointing out why they were wrong and where things were real in my experience. We went through in 2001 a difficult time, a really difficult time. One of my housemates wasn't well and suffered from depression, and she at that time attempted to take her own life, which was really tough. Thankfully she's fine and doing well, but at that time, like, a friend asked if I would go to church with her because she wanted someone who knew what was happening. Like the weekend that it happened, she wanted someone that knew what was happening to kind of be there, so she wouldn't have to explain what had gone on and why. And so in order, shamefully to say, I guess, in order to score some brownie points with this friend, I went along to Ivy that weekend, and I was surprised. Like there were people in that building who wanted to be there. There was life. There was something that struck me, and so I kind of went back the week after. And whereas in the first week I felt a bit uncomfortable and kind of was there as an observer, the next week I dared to stand up when other people stood up, and the week after, I was like maybe humming a couple of the songs, and the week after, maybe starting to sing some of the lyrics. And then there's a song probably 4 or 5 weeks in called Eagle's Wings. And it's got a line in it that says, "Here I am waiting, come live in me, I pray." And the following week, after hearing that song for the first time, like every time I was at a bus stop going into university or had a moment to myself, like this song just popped in my head. It was like a little earworm. And I think then I was praying and kind of exploring and saying, God, if you are who you say you are, like I want to know more of you. I want to know who you are. And then we sang the same song the following week, and I sang it as a prayer, and kind of said, yeah, if you are who you say you are, God, then I'm sorry for who I am and who I've been, and I recognize the gift that you are offering to us, that through Jesus' death I can be free, I can be restored to wholeness, I can be with you, and so I want that, and let me follow you, and I expected everything to suddenly change, and my experience was it felt like nothing did. Like there's no flashing lights or superpowers. It was just kind of a journey and an onward walk. But looking back, like everything changed. So that's where I got to where I am in terms of being, I guess, an elder at Ivy, and having some responsibility for trying to lead a church, and to have that privilege and that joy of working with people like you and you know, Anthony and Rob and Sarah and Rob and Jane. It's just it's amazing to be able to serve in that way. So yeah, that's I guess a little bit of me and my testimony.
That's awesome. That's great, Adam. Thank you. Thanks, Adam, for sharing that testimony. And it's so unique, right? And I think that's the way that God works. He knows what we need to hear at a particular time. And thank you for sharing that story. So, or like fast forward to current times then, in the midst of everything that's going on, how would you say that your discipleship journey has been shaped by the current circumstances, you know, in terms of the area of faith? What are the things that have been on your mind?
Loads, like urgency. You know, one of our primary reasons for being church is to help people find their way back to God. And so in terms of my discipleship journey, like I've been sharpened and challenged by the years that I've been at Ivy to try and do that effectively, to be kind of open to and praying for my friends and my family and my neighbors and just people who I meet, that there may be an opportunity, there may be some way that they may see something in my life or through my words or through my actions that will help them to see Jesus and to find their way back to that relationship with God through him. And so, yeah, the current kind of coronavirus crisis and the pandemic that's going on, like, it's really given me a sense of urgency to act. Like, I don't know what's coming next, but I do know in myself, like I have through my faith, through that gift that Jesus gave, a confidence. And like, I want other people to have the opportunity to have that confidence. So yeah, a real kind of sense of urgency in that space. And it gives me, you know, it's meant that I've had more open conversations with people than I might have shied away from previously, or might have been kind of like, oh, no, now's not the time to be saying that. But it was a really helpful word that came out of the Glasgow Prophetic Centre 2 or 3 days ago, which was about the kind of hard ground and the fact that now's the time to kind of break up that soil. And literally half an hour after reading that, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues at work, kind of being able to share the 3 circles kind of picture to help her to hopefully see what it might mean to follow Jesus. And we've had chats and we've, you know, kind of danced around it a little bit, but not really engaged fully with that. And so, yeah, it was kind of, it's good. And you know, and I don't want to go back. So I don't want to go back to dancing around and shying away from it. Like, let's take the opportunities that are there sensitively, and where it's helpful and right, and that there is a sense that there's a soft heart to hear. Like, let's step into that space with confidence and use the gifts and the skills that God's given us to try and help people to see the reality of what it might mean to follow Jesus.
That's great. That's awesome. And you know, and being in your profession, Adam, being a doctor, being a GP, you know, your class as a frontline worker. So you're seeing a lot of things happening at the, you know, potentially at the more severe end, you know, more than other people. Like, you know, other people, there's like funny jokes going on Facebook where, hey, you're saving the world by just staying at home and lying on the couch. It's like, how hard is that? And then the people who are more like off the front line don't really get a real sense of what it's like for you being where you are. Like, how do you find that challenge? Because there is a risk, personal risk involved to you, you know, and it's your profession, and you have that calling to bring more people back to God. How does all that kind of come together for you?
Yeah, I think so. That sense of being on the front line of this in terms of work, in terms of being in that kind of healthcare sphere, is again been really interesting to try and juggle it and to try and make sense of it. As you know, the idea that people can save the world, like be superheroes by staying at home, by lying on the sofa, like, it's true. Like, please, like, do that. Like, I have absolute confidence that that is the right thing for as many people as can to do right now, and it's far from easy to do that. You know, like, I know that trying to keep the kids entertained, trying to keep yourself entertained, trying to cope with being imprisoned in some ways, like that sense of being kept in is really hard. And it's almost a blessing that I can jump in the car to go to the practice, and I'm driving along and I'm thinking and praying for people who don't have that freedom, or don't feel that freedom to be able to jump in the car and head to work, because work's good. Like, you know, work is a good thing, and to have that taken away is going to be really hard for lots of people. So I'm kind of aware of that. But there's also this sense of, as Matt Round was sharing in the Faith Lift this morning, that for some people the reality is that they're in the eye of the storm. Like, it's a time of relative quiet, and there's space there. It's kind of, there's a sense that there's a storm somewhere, but it feels a bit distant when you're cocooned. And as a GP, like, I feel at the moment that when I'm at work, on the edge of the storm. So the work that we're doing at the practice is really kind of trying to help people to stay well. But I'm not currently seeing lots of people who have coronavirus. Like, I think that's going to be changing in the next days and weeks, but actually at the moment it's kind of on the edge of the storm. Whereas I know that there's people who are working in the intensive care units who are in the storm. Like, so even I feel in the work that I'm currently doing on the edge of it. But there's definitely something about how we transition from those spaces. So we need to kind of be mindful that, you know, there's some people whose reality very much is in the eye of the storm. There's some people whose reality is on the edge of the storm. There's some people that I need to care for whose reality is they're in the midst of the storm. And it's kind of juggling that and trying to make sense of it and trying to work out what we can do as individuals or as a community of believers to help support people in all of those areas. And yeah, it's yeah.
And you talk about the eye of the storm. I love that. I love that picture that you're painting there. Um, for you, you're saying you're on the edge of the storm, and I know that you're a family man. I mean, you have kids and married to Helen, and they're potentially uh, in the eye of the storm. So you almost have that transition, right, Adam? You're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff during the day, long hours, and then you come home. And is there a shift there? Like, what is that experience for you? Like,
You know, and it's changing day by day, but last night was a great example. Like I left the practice at 7:30, 7:45-8ish. Like, and that's not that unusual, but getting home to Helen and the girls that day was tough because they'd had their experience of what, very much living in the eye of the storm yesterday, and wanted to kind of share some of that. But I found that when I got home, I'd neglected some of the disciplines that are helpful, like switching off during that 15-minute car journey home. Like, I phoned Anthony and we were chatting about some stuff, and then I was still getting messages from colleagues to make plans for today. So I was responding to those, and I kind of walked through the door still in or on the edge of the storm, and couldn't hear. Like, I all I could kind of hear was the noise of the storm in a way, and it was really hard to tune into to Helen and the girls, and it created that slight sense of like, oh, what's going on here? Like, why is there this tension? What's happening? And it wasn't really until listening to Matt this morning and working through some of this that I'm kind of like, okay, that's what was going on, and that's okay. So then it becomes a challenge to me, is to say, well, okay, so what can I do differently when I'm coming home from work on Monday, or when I'm coming out of, currently I'm sat in my kind of rapidly reclaimed home office, that actually when I leave this room, like, I'm going to need to decompress. When I've been working, when I've been doing video consultations with patients, when I've been talking to patients and their families about some of the possibilities around, how do we best navigate this coming season. Like, I'm going to have to practice that discipline of stopping and praying and worshipping and doing all those things that help me to recenter and realize again who I am and what the multiple facets of my character might be. So yeah, that's been lessons to learn and lessons to learn rapidly. But the other thing that's going to be a reality for us is that Helen is a healthcare professional as well. She's a physiotherapist, and currently has worked as an outpatient physiotherapist, essentially helping people with chronic pain. But because of the realities of where we are right now, like, she's being trained to redeploy onto critical care units and to be one of those frontline workers who will be in the storm. And so again, for us to kind of navigate that and to be like trying to work out, how do we look after the kids, and tag team being on the front line, and most likely both in the storm at different times, rather than even on the edge of it, is going to be something that, we're continuing to kind of pray and think about. And we're so grateful for the fact that we're part of a community of people who are selfless and who will support us in that, whether that's on hand or remotely. Like, we know that our kids are looked after not just by us, but by our whole kind of Ivy community and our families that, our kind of blood family, as well as our kind of church family. So, so we're blessed to have that support as well.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned, Adam, about, I think, disciplines. And it's interesting because that's been in my mind. I shared something recently about the whole how we transition through the day, and it's like, yeah, when you go from work to home, and even when you're at home, you may be transitioning from being a husband or a brother to then like a father, or and it's like taking that time, exactly as you said, to just switch, transition well. It's like releasing the tension of everything that's happened up to that point, and then setting a very clear intention. So the way I kind of picture it, and I don't always do this well, but it's like, if I'm coming home from work, release the tension from work, just let it go. And before I walk through the front door, it's like, well, my intention is to be a fantastic husband, who has a great sense of humor. Just joking. It's like, but it's that thought, and it's very easy to neglect that and to overlook it, right? Because when you're in a storm, it's like, it's very hard to almost to go from fifth gear all the way down to the first gear or second gear. You mentioned disciplines there, like, and you're a leader in many ways, and in different roles. People, your patients who come to you see you as that authority figure. You're the expert. They're looking for guidance, and at home maybe you have certain responsibilities as well within Ivy too. So how do you manage? Like, how do you look after yourself, Adam, in a way where you're not redlining it too much, and you don't end up being overwhelmed and being burnt out?
Yeah. Uh, so how do I look after myself to avoid burnout, and what disciplines can I kind of call upon, I guess, to help with that? So yeah, there's a whole host of spiritual disciplines, like to pray and to meditate and to worship, are kind of key. And like, that journey home is got to be a window for actually just spending that time, sticking on that worship music and singing your heart out to praise God. Actually is a great way of resetting. So there's some disciplines there that I call upon, and I'm aware when I don't. And then I guess, there's some other kind of physical disciplines, physical ways that I cope. So I lots of people know that I run a lot, and probably pathologically, but I've found that helps me both physically and mentally and spiritually to just spend time in solitude in some ways. So one of the things that I did on the day that the day before, having kind of predicted that the lockdown was going to be announced, kind of knowing where we were heading, I kind of panic bought a treadmill, and then on the day of the lockdown, it was like, okay, I now need to make sure that I can get this delivery. And I was like, I finished again work about 8 o'clock, and I was phoning Andy, my treadmill man, to be like, Andy, is there any way that I can come to your place in Stoke? I'll get a van now. I'll drive down, like, before the full announcement that I thought might come, which is, actually we need for 2 weeks now to be cutting out all travel, kind of, that there's going to be, police on the road stopping deliveries, and that I thought we might end up in that place. At that time, I was like, oh, this is what's going to come. I need to get this treadmill. Anyway, long story short, the treadmill arrived, and it's been great to be able to still call on that sanctuary for me, to be able to move and to run and to exercise in still a fairly pathological sense.
So you say you're, like, just for the sake of the people who are watching this, Adam says he's a runner. Like, there's a runner, and then there's a runner, and then there's a runner, and Adam's even like the bit after, he's the person after that, right? I mean, quick fire question, like, what on average on a training, like, what's the event that you're training for that hopefully will still come to pass next year that you've been
So,
working for years to get towards?
yeah, so I guess really quick history. I've been running for about 7 years. Before that, I used to play a bit of football, and there was basically this time 7 years ago during Lent, I decided on a whim to take on a little challenge that would be to run for at least 40 minutes a day for 40 days during Lent. So I did 6 days a week, 40 minutes a day. And during that time, changed from being a kind of occasional jogger, occasional runner, to being a bit of a Forrest Gump, and discovering that I had a real sense of joy from running, and like I said, kind of physically, mentally, and spiritually found it helpful. So so at that time, started running, started to do a marathon, did all right, and did another one, and did another one, and then started to run ultra marathons, and heard about this race called the Spine Race, which is 268 miles from Edale to Kirk Yetham, so from the Peak District to the Scottish borders. It's the length of the Pennine Way. As a non-stop foot race. I wouldn't call it a running race. It's kind of a foot race. Some people run it, but I might do a little bit of running. You never know. And it's something I've been working to for certainly 5 years as a definite goal. And I'm planning to do it in January for my 40th birthday present to myself, which is in August next year. Yeah, it's in January, which is, kind of UK, Northern England winter, like dark, cold, wet, cold, dark, snowy, dark, cold, boggy, wet. And I can't wait. And it's going to be amazing. So yeah, I'm praying that still goes ahead. And if it doesn't, it will in some guys. And if it doesn't, I'm sure there will be a spine equivalent in heaven. So yeah, I'll do it at some stage.
Sure. I mean, just to reiterate, guys, that's 268 miles nonstop. And Adam says he might do a bit of running. I think he will do a lot of running, knowing this guy, knowing his commitment, knowing his drive. And thank you so much for giving an insight into what's going on personally for you, with regards to your work and how, and how you have that sense of urgency, and recognize that, yes, we've never been through these times before. I think the popular word now is unprecedented. So I'm trying not to say that as much because it's just everywhere. Do you have any parting thoughts in terms of where you see God is moving, on a kind of a bigger scale with this, through your lens and through your understanding?
Yeah, the unprecedented, I guess, just coming back to that sense that we're living in unprecedented times. I've wrestled with that a little bit, in that I'm not convinced that we are. I think that there are things that we can glean from history, both near and far, that might help us to understand how we could act right now, how we could respond right now, how we can live right now. So in terms of where I see God moving, I think that there are little reminders and little prompts for me to look to the past, to look to history. And that includes, looking to the Word, looking to the Bible, reading it with a prophetic lens, reading it with a historical lens, reading it with a lens that says, okay, what does this passage say for me today? How can I interpret this based on history? How can I interpret this based on what I know is the truth of the future? And so there's a real challenge for me to carve out the time to do that well. And it was brilliant on Wednesday. Days kind of all blend into one, but WTC, they did their no, it was Monday, wasn't it, the hub night, and and I managed to hop onto that kind of open night with WTC, and that was brilliant to be able to start to study, for me, a little bit of theology, like formally in a way, and to see this week that WTC were releasing their online theology kind of classes free to anybody who wants them up until June or the end of July or whenever it is. Like, that's amazing. And that's what I see, how I see God moving, like people being kind and thinking, what can I do with the things that God's given me to serve others? Like, that's what I see WTC doing. That's what I see this guy that brought me to tears on a Facebook post last night on one of the running groups, who had a spare like little foot pod that measures your running steps, and somebody was looking for one and couldn't get it delivered, and they looked and they were like, well, I've got two and I don't need them, like, I'll send it to you. And the person responded like, I'll buy it from you. And he's like, look, what's money? Like, take it, share it. And that's Acts 2 in action.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what do I see God doing? Like, calling us to be disciples and to follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Amen. Thank you, Adam. And so appreciate your time in sharing, and I'm sure people got a lot of insight and they're encouraged as well. And yeah, may God continue to protect you and bless you as you put yourself at physical risk in serving, and all the other people in a similar position as well. But thank you for your courage and your insight, and being obedient to listen to God, to hear him direct your actions, direct your thoughts. That sense of urgency is going to enable you to have those conversations that you might not have had or might have put off in the past. And you're going to, and in doing so, you're winning more people for the kingdom, lives saved. And there's nothing more important than that. So thank you, Adam. I appreciate your time.
Cheers, Andy.
Take care. Bye-bye.